Dear parents and guardians, welcome to the English Language Curriculum Briefing for Primary 3. We appreciate your efforts in making time for this as we continue to collaborate to develop our students holistically. Please allow me to share some key areas that we would be looking at in the teaching and learning of English language. Today, we will be looking at the following areas: content, pedagogy, assessment, and useful websites. What you see here is the English language framework. It represents the key features of the English Syllabus 2020 that is undergirded by the principles of English language teaching and learning processes. To achieve the overarching aim of the English language syllabus, a two-pronged approach of building a strong foundation and providing rich language for all will be adopted. Teachers will plan lessons thoughtfully after taking into consideration students' readiness to learn, interests, and learning profiles to enhance students' learning further. Students' language use is reflected in the following areas of language learning, namely listening and viewing, reading and viewing, speaking and representing, writing and representing, grammar, and vocabulary. From 2022, the P3s have been adopting the new English language syllabus known as ELS 2020, which emphasizes on two key shifts. Firstly, the desired learner outcomes. In sharpening and strengthening the competencies required for the 21st century, we want to develop our students as empathetic communicators, discerning readers, and creative inquirers. The new syllabus supports this by encouraging students to read widely and process information critically. It will also explore and evaluate real-world issues and multiple perspectives, as well as gather information through diverse print, non-print, and digital sources. Students will be encouraged to explore ideas, concepts, and areas of interest and promote the joy of learning. Secondly, the focus would be on stronger fundamentals and future learning. We will be focusing on strengthening the foundation in the four language areas: grammar, oracy, writing, and reading. We place a greater emphasis on the teaching of grammar and oracy skills explicitly, strengthening the reading-writing connection, and teaching reading comprehension skills. We have also allocated one EL period each week for extensive reading. In line with the fast-changing English language teaching and learning landscape, teachers will be paying increased attention to multiliteracies, metacognition, and inquiry through dialogue, or MMI in short, in order to help our students achieve the 21st century competencies across all areas of language learning. The first aspect of the English language curriculum is content. The English language curriculum is mapped directly to the Stellar 2.0 curriculum. The strategies for English language learning and reading, or Stellar for short, curriculum aims to strengthen the students' foundation in literacy skills through a variety of learner-centered and developmentally appropriate pedagogical approaches using authentic children's text. What you see on the right are some of the readers that our students would be using this year. Through these stories, we introduce students to essential language features, and the language use is reflected in 6 areas: listening and viewing, reading and viewing, speaking and representing, writing and representing, grammar, and vocabulary. During these stellar lessons, teachers would employ the following strategies to engage students in learning to use and appreciate the English language. In semester 1, teachers would use big and small books to introduce the features of the text. In semester 2, the students would move on to printed readers that would use the supported reading strategy to complete whole text study as well as introduce the nuances of the English language. Using retelling and KWL, teachers further introduce students to comprehension skills to further unpack and understand the text. During this point of time, many text types, such as narrative, personal recount, and information texts, are introduced to the students. The comprehension is extended to writing through MLEA and WPC. In MLEA, students are given an opportunity to touch, feel, or experience a joint event like painting or planting. Based on the experience, students would be guided to write a class, a group, and individual pieces of writing. In semester 2, students would move on to WPC, where they would draft the writing and work on strengthening focused areas in their composition. In Huamin, we use differentiated instruction in our writing package to offer personalized instruction based on students' strengths and areas for growth. Students who require more scaffolding and guidance would be working closely with their teachers for idea generation as well as editing for their language skills. Differentiated focus lessons, or DFL for short, are also being introduced in Stellar 2.0. Teachers will match students' learning readiness and learning profiles to the instructional strategies. This is to promote teaching that is responsive to the readiness, interests, and learning profiles of today's students. Teachers may differentiate the content, process, product, and environment to review, reinforce, or extend students' learning of skills taught in that unit. Now that you have heard about the different teaching and learning approaches in the English language classroom, let us now share the content that would be covered this year. For Stella, students will be reading the big and small books in the first semester. In semester 2, they would move on to the Stella readers that come in booklets. Based on the text that they have read, the class would then move on to learning sheets, which actually are activity sheets tagged to the various language components that have been taught in class. Other than the Stella readers, extensive readers are also given to students to encourage reading in class. Extensive reading will be carried out for one period per week. The aim is to nurture students' love for reading so that they will become lifelong readers. Besides these extensive readers, our school also has library periods where students go to the library to borrow books every alternate week. In doing this, we are providing students with access to a wide range of quality materials that are age appropriate and the space and time to read for pleasure. Other than the stellar material, students would also have the following items with them. They would have the grammar booklets, the listening comprehension and oral book, the 5-color red file for the following learning resources: the Stellar worksheets and readers, school-based focus worksheets, the writing package, the stimulus-based conversation package or SBC for short, the practice papers, the supplementary and remedial worksheets. Finally, they would also have 2 exercise books, one for spelling and the second one for journal and our P4C journal. So please do ensure that they come with the following materials. Other than the items that I had mentioned earlier, students would also have the following items. The BFG Storybook, which is part of the book club program, and I will be elaborating a little more on this in the next few slides. Students are also required to bring their own storybooks, as they are encouraged to read English storybooks on Mondays, Tuesdays, and Wednesdays for silent reading before the start of lessons each day. The dictionary, however, is optional. They do not need to carry their dictionaries to school every day. The second aspect of the English language curriculum is pedagogy. One key pedagogy we use in the department is Philosophy for Children, or P4C for short. Thinking skills are explicitly taught, and students are given opportunities to question and reason. It is a student-led, inquiry-based approach to learning where students work in communities of inquiries, or COIs, to discuss various issues and themes. It builds on higher order thinking and speaking and listening skills, as it improves students' critical and creative thinking skills. This also builds on the students' own wonder and curiosity about the ideas around them or global philosophical concepts. In P4C, students and teachers discuss deeper philosophical issues and get a chance to voice their opinions in a safe environment. They learn to voice their opinions in a polite manner and work in groups to solve problems. While honing their creativity and critical thinking skills, students also improve their oracy as they learn to communicate with their peers in English. In particular, when students learn to justify their stance with reasons and evidences, they are better prepared for the stimulus-based conversation component in the oral assessment at year end. We realize that students become more confident speakers who articulate well while presenting their views. These students are taught to be discerning readers when they review evidences to support or refute their points of view. In this slide, you see pictures of our students engaging in P4C discussions in their various lessons. Many studies have shown that reading is an essential part of language development. Reading lends itself naturally to vocabulary development, critical thinking, and fluency in writing. In Huamin, we have the Book Club, a program that aims to cultivate reading as a lifelong habit. During English lessons, students will read and analyze a novel together with their teachers. Besides participating in interactive activities and discussion, students will also be annotating key elements in their own personal novels for learning purposes. This year, students will be enjoying the BFG by Roald Dahl. Through this program, students will develop an understanding towards literary elements such as plot, setting, and characterization, the ability to think critically to form justified opinions, and language skills connected to literary devices such as similes, metaphors, personification, and so on. The purchase of this book would be subsidized, and students would be co-paying for the book with their EduSave funds. Details of this program would be provided at a later date. In the next few slides, we will be introducing some strategies we use in our English language classrooms. First, we have the word of the week, which is a strategy used to build students' repertoire of vocabulary. New words are introduced on a weekly basis. Besides reviewing the meaning of these words, students will also explore the usage of these words in context. Students are then encouraged to practice using these words in their composition writing. Secondly, we introduce the annotation for grammar and vocabulary questions. In the lower primary, students were taught basic annotation during their comprehension lessons. In primary 3, this is extended to the learning and application of grammar and vocabulary. For this strategy, students are taught to identify clue words in the sentences while grammar rules are taught explicitly. They are also taught to make connections to pre-existing vocabulary knowledge to review their options before selecting their answers. More than just zooming in on answers, the focus is on metacognition, where students think about their learning. We get students to articulate their thinking processes by asking questions like, how do we know? Where are the clues that tell us so? Why is this the correct option and not the other? Secondly, we introduce the annotation for grammar and vocabulary questions. In the lower primary, students were taught basic annotation during their comprehension lessons. In primary 3, this is extended to the learning and application of grammar and vocabulary. For this strategy, students are taught to identify clue words in the sentences while grammar rules are taught explicitly. They are also taught to make connections to pre-existing vocabulary knowledge to review their options before selecting their answers. More than just zooming in on answers, the focus is on metacognition, where students think about their learning. We get students to articulate their thinking processes by asking questions like, how do we know? Where are the clues that tell us so? Why is this the correct option and not the other?
Annotation is one of the teaching strategies we use in our English lessons. It helps us engage deeply with sentences or texts by identifying keywords, making notes, and asking questions. In annotation, we first read the sentence. Then, we identify keywords that give us clues to the answer. Now, let us look at the examples here. David injured blank just now while he was climbing up the tree. Let us look at the options given. We have myself, herself, himself, and ourselves. They are all reflexive pronouns. Because of the pronoun he, which refers to David, the answer would be himself because of the pronoun him. Next question. While watching the movie just now, Chloe blank annoyed by the man who spoke loudly behind her. Looking at our options, we see a mix of present and past tense verbs. Let's look at the sentence again. The phrase just now tells us that the action happened in the past. So we can cancel out the present tense verbs is and are. Now we are left with was and were. Because our main noun, Chloe, is one person, the verb following Chloe should be in singular form. Hence, our answer is was. Next question. The telephone is blank now. Please answer it immediately. The options given are ring, rang, is ringing, and was ringing. The word now emphasizes that the event is ongoing. So, is ringing, which describes action happening at this very moment, is our answer. And last question. Last Wednesday, I blank the kids' kampong for my learning journey. The phrase last Wednesday tells us that the action happened in the past. Looking at our options, go and goes are in present tense. Have gone is in present perfect tense. Our last option is went, which is in past tense. Hence, the answer to this question is went. That is all for a brief introduction to annotation.
Next, just like the earlier annotation for grammar and vocabulary, we teach detailed annotation for comprehension passages and questions. For comprehension questions, we use the CUB strategy, where we get students to identify question words, key words, and any references that have been made to the passage. This would help students locate relevant answers and make linkages to the text as a whole. Annotation is also a strategy that Stellar 2.0 is recommending. Let us move on to the last aspect of the English language curriculum, which is assessment. In Huamin, we conduct both summative and formative assessments. Let us look at the summative assessment first. Summative or weighted assessments are evaluated with scores being included in the overall weighting. The table shown on the slide is based on the school's assessment plan. This is also available on page 30 of the student's handbook. Students will sit for weighted assessments 1, 2, and 3 in the first 3 terms of school. This will be bite-sized assessments pegged at specific components of the language. In term 4, students will sit for the year-end examination, which tests all the components of English language. Details of the scope and date of assessments will be shared with the parents closer to the assessment date itself. The EYE examinations, or the end of year examinations for English language, would encompass the following components. Paper 1, which is writing. This is the composition segment, which is worth 20 marks. Paper 2, which is the language use and comprehension segment, which is worth 50 marks. Paper 3, the listening comprehension segment, which is worth 14 marks. And finally, paper 4, which is the oral segment, which is worth 16 marks, making up the 100 marks for year-end examinations. The formative assessments are bite-sized assessment tasks that are assigned to check students' mastery of components or skills that have been taught. Teachers would close the learning gaps based on these FAs and plan appropriate intervention measures to address the learning needs of their students. Some of these FAs would include self-evaluation, where students would use a rubric or checklist to gauge their own performance; peer evaluation, where students would use a rubric or checklist to gauge the performance level of their peers; reflections, this may include a personal perspective of their mastery. It may also include steps or strategies that they would use to close their learning gaps. The glow and grow statements, usually used for the writing component, teachers would provide the strengths of a student's writing, which is the glow statements, and an area that they would need to work on in order to improve, which is the grow statement. Though these FAs are not weighted, you would find them very useful to keep track of your children's learning progress in school through these assignments and tasks.
Some of these formative assessments would include self-evaluation, where students would use a rubric or checklist to gauge their own performance; peer evaluation, where students would use a rubric or checklist to gauge the performance level of their peers; reflections, this may include a personal perspective of their mastery. It may also include steps or strategies they would use to close their learning gaps. Glow and grow statements, which are usually used for the writing component, in which teachers would provide the strength of a student's writing, glow, and an area they will need to work on in order to improve, grow. These formative assessments are not weighted, but parents may keep track of their children's learning progress through these assignments.
The next two slides will feature useful websites that you may find beneficial for English language learning. You may wish to access them when you are assisting your children with their language learning and revision. In this slide, you will see some resources that would assist children in becoming independent and self-directed learners. You are strongly recommended to sign up for a library account using the NLB website. In particular, the Libby app, which can be downloaded on most devices, including iPads and mobile phones, is an excellent reading resource that has a repository of titles that would relate to people of all ages. Do visit the links to find out how you may sign up to get your very own Libby account. Thank you and have a pleasant day ahead.